Good morning. Today we're going to be trying to make our first batch of compost using our tumbler compost bin. It's been the first time we've done it, so I've got a number of ingredients here that we're going to chuck in. We feel a little bit like a witch. Going to put it all into the cauldron, and hopefully in 2 to 3 weeks with some positive aeration we'll get a good result out of it. So what we've got to put into the compost today in terms of our batch is we've got these chips here, which is a mix of wood chips and some dried leaves as well that I put through the shredder a few days ago. They've got a fairly good or equal carbon nitrogen mix. That's sort of 25 to 30 to 1 ratio that we're after. We've also got a bunch of kitchen waste that Coco seems to be helping us with. Thank you, Coco. So this has been rotting away for the past couple of weeks. Got a little bit of seaweed in there as well, so we're going to throw all of that kitchen waste in there. And we've got some shredded paper for that extra carbon aspect. And I'm also going to use some of this fairly mature compost. It's been sitting around the garden for the last probably 12 months. It hasn't been aerated, so it's been scraps added to it constantly over that period, and we've got some rotting mass underneath that we're going to add into the compost tumbler to help the process along. So we're going to chuck a fairly good mix of all of these elements in, and hopefully with some luck we'll get a good batch of compost come out. So as you can see, I've done a fair bit of pruning this morning just in the back garden. So there's an old apple tree, it's still producing fruit down in the back corner. I've trimmed some of the lower branches off that, and I've also trimmed this mulberry tree just to give it a little bit of space underneath for the kids to run around in, to be fair. And on the back side of the garden is this, we've got an old lemon tree and a very old apple tree which is died, and so I'm just going to be taking that apart with the handsaw. And so once we've got all of this organic matter along with the apple tree and the remnants of the pruning, I'm just going to let that dry out for a few days, and then we're going to take our Ryobi electric impact shredder and we're going to make some mulch out of that. That'll be the next step. I'm now ready to start creating my first set of mulch using the new Ryobi shredder. So we've got all of the leftovers here from the apple tree that we chopped down and the apple tree twigs that we've got down there. So we're just going to get these underway now and see what we end up with down on our tarp, which we can then move around the garden nice and easily and get that into the compost as we need. As you can see, my pile of cuttings is all gone, and the Ryobi shredder has done a pretty good job for me. I'm on my last few now, so I'm going to whack those through. We've got this beautiful mulch down here, this beautiful rich mulch which we're going to put into the compost. We're really looking forward to seeing what the results of that will be in a few weeks' time. Now, because our kitchen waste is quite wet, now we're going to put in a shovel load of that first, and then we're going to put in a shovel load of the dry contents afterwards. So we just keep mixing that up rather than having them all sitting together in one big stewy lump. So that was one load of kitchen waste. Then we're going to put in the mix of chips and leaves. Maybe an extra shovel load of that as well. Put in a handful of this rich old compost that we've got lying around in the garden. Help things along. And some of the shredded paper as well. and then we'll just rinse and repeat. So we've finished loading up the compost bin now with all our different elements. So if we just turn around and have a wee look at it, so there's our tumbler, and if we just pop our heads over and squeak down in there, it's almost half full. See, it's coming up towards the bar there. That top layer is the layer of chip that we put across the top, and there's all the different layers building up from there, including the kitchen waste and the earlier compost starter and the shredded newspaper and cardboard. So we've got a good carbon nitrogen mix, I hope. It's a bit of an experiment, bit of trial and error, but we'll see how we go. And what we're going to do is just lock it up. Let's put our lid on top, and that'll be it for the next few weeks. And what we'll do is we'll basically give it a tumble every few days. So just a bit harder tumble than that, and so it all spins over, so it's all mixed up. And we'll do that every 1 or 2 days, just to make sure we get lots of air through it. And hopefully in a couple of weeks we'll get a good compost hummus mix come out of that. Now today is February the 16th, so all going well. At the end of February we should see something come out of it. Okay, so we're going to start taking some measurements of the compost now that it's been in there for a few days, and we've kept it tumbling, and hopefully it's managed to get up to that sort of thermophilic area that we want it to be in order to kill off all the pathogens. So I've got my wee little meat thermometer here, which is the best thing that I could find, and we're going to pop that on in right into the heart of the compost there, and see if we can get a bit of a reading off that. Oh, so it looks like it's around about that 55-degree mark. Oh, can we see that? There we go. It's starting to drop now as I've pulled it out, but that's a good sign. It's March 17 today, and it's been almost 4 weeks actually since we started the whole process of the compost and the tumbler. Now the compost itself seems to have matured fairly well, although I did have some misgivings. After about 2 weeks it got to the state that it's in now, so it hasn't really changed between that 2-week period and today. I wanted to give it longer because it looked like there's still a lot of wood chip left inside it, but nothing has eventuated in the past sort of 2 extra weeks that we've left it there sit. So we're just going to actually empty it today. We're going to empty the barrel today. I've rigged up a little, just a little, I guess, grater across the top to pull out some of the heavier bits or the less decomposed pieces as we tip it over. Hopefully that will act as a sort of large scale filter. So we're going to tip it over, and we're going to have a wee look at it now, and then we're going to run our tests and get our radishes growing hopefully in the next week or so. Okay, so here's our compost that we've managed to produce. It's quite an interesting thing. A couple of interesting things to note is that there's a lot of life in there, sort of worms and invertebrates. One thing that I'm a little bit concerned with is that the cardboard and newspaper particles haven't really decomposed well. It's also quite twiggy. Coco's come and have a look too, see how interesting that is. But you remember how we put in a lot of that apple tree, how we trimmed that right down, and that hasn't really decomposed either. So I'm not really getting that sort of hummusy sort of feel to it. It's very woody, very barky. The grater worked well. We've got a bunch of items left over in there, some of those bigger items, decomposed or partially decomposed carrots and some chopped up vegetables which didn't really make it through. But this is the compost that we're left with. Looks more like a mulch, to be fair, than a compost, but we're going to run with it. We're going to see how we go. We're going to run a few tests with it, and hopefully we'll get a little bit of growth out of it. Alright, so we're going to begin the process of testing the compost out. And in order to do that, we're going to take some and put it in some seedling plants. We're going to put a few seeds of radishes in there and see how they go, and test that against a control using a standard organic compost that we've bought from the shop. So let's go and grab some of our compost, and or more mulch I should say, and stuff that in. Okay, so there is our seed pack, or our compost pack ready to go. We're going to take that down to our seedling bay, our stainless steel tray, and we're going to set up our other compost and get going with our test. Okay, so here's our seedling trays. On the left hand side I've got the organic compost that I've purchased from a shop, so it's this guy here, and we just pack that in tightly and make sure it's nice and moist. And on the right hand side we've got our own compost, and now we've got our king seeds, our organic radish seeds. We're going to pop those in and give them a fairly liberal sprinkling in the hope that something germinates. And we'll just put those down a little bit. Make sure they've got some good coverage in there, at least some of them do anyway. And then, similar to what we'll do, what I've done with the other seedlings we've got going here, is we'll, some of those have started to germinate. We'll just put some Glad wrap across the top of it and leave it out here. It's a nice sunny spot. We'll leave it out here, and it's still warm, temperature's still warm. We'll leave it out here for 4 or 5 days, and then hopefully we'll start to see something germinating. Well, at least out of our own homemade compost anyway. Excellent. All right, let's wait and see. 5 days time. It's a crazy windy day here in Auckland today. Hopefully you can hear me. I've got great news. Radishes have sprouted. Let's go down and take a look. So if you remember, just there on the left hand side is our control with our organic compost, and just on the right hand side is our own homemade batch. And well, 4 out of 5 of those have sprouted really nicely, and I'm super excited. So that's a big thumbs up from me, and I'm really stoked that the test has worked. The radishes have survived, and I can now go and put them in my veggie patch, and we're going to be eating organic radishes before not too long.